Are we good to go, Xander? You sure? Cool. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Table 604 podcast. I'm your host, Hugo. And then today I have a really cool guest on today. So what we're going to do is just obviously talk. What I like to do is just have a general conversation, whatever, and just like, maybe tell us about yourself, and then we'll just slowly branch off from there and just have a regular conversation, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Hopefully this doesn't screw up your intro.
No, don't worry about it. We're very relaxed here.
I'm assuming you guys will like piece and cut and post edit all the stupid shit that I may say.
Kind of, yeah. We're going raw, so you don't have to worry about it. It's all about having a regular conversation. Don't worry about what you say. Honestly, we're free spirits here, so no, don't worry. We're an open book, and yeah, maybe you can start. Introduce yourself, and we'll just go from there, pretty much.
Yeah. So I'm Brad Hendrickson. It's weird talking in third person. I was born in the States, in Idaho, and then essentially found my life into the culinary career. I think that's kind of where you found me. Was it through Biota?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was actually. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, from a super young age, I knew I wanted to cook for a living. So essentially, I was a fat kid and I loved food. So that was kind of my big draw for it. And then I went to culinary school. I was in Seattle for a couple of years, and then moved to New York and lived there for a couple of years and worked for some incredible chefs, like Daniel Boulud and Paul Liebrent. And then kind of missed the West Coast vibe. So moved back to Seattle and, worked for a Spanish chef, Joseba Jimenez, at the Harvest Vine, and just pretty much fell in love with Spanish food at the time. And at the Spanish restaurant, I met my wife, who's from Vancouver. So it was kind of like put to me, shit or get off the pot. I'm not moving. Like just moved back to Vancouver. She's like, I'm not if this is going to be a thing, you need to move to Vancouver or not. And so luckily enough, Daniel Boulud just took over Lumiere at that time. So they sponsored me and relocated me up here to Vancouver. And then my wife and I, we weren't married at the time, just continued dating, and I was in the industry still here. And yeah, and then Lumiere closed, and I went on with Del McKay, who is the executive chef at Lumiere. He won Top Chef Canada Season 1. Which was, pretty cool to help train him and do that with that kind of stuff. And then he opened Ensemble,
Okay.
which was downtown on Thurlow. And we pretty much cherry-picked all the great talent from Lumiere and DB Bistro. And yeah, and then we... I'm assuming you want me to keep going.
No worries. I will go a little bit back because I want to know a little bit more about your childhood, what got you into cooking, and then we'll slowly work into that if that's okay. So let's go back to when young you in Idaho, what got you into cooking? I know you said you liked eating and things like that, but there must have been maybe a moment or a specific food that you like to eat. Bring us back to the old you.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I attribute it to, looking back, my grandfather was a very simple cook. We would go camping and he would do Dutch oven cooking. So I'm assuming open fire cooking. And it was just super simple food, but I just really appreciated how it brought the family together and how good it tasted for as simple as it was. And my parents were divorced when I was quite young, so seeing how it brought family together, it made me really appreciate what food could do in that sense. So yeah, part of it was okay, I want to make sure I want to know where my next meal is. But the other part that I think is a bit more soulful is okay, I see how this brings people together.
Yeah, I think that's like a big thing about cooking. I mean, I think I mentioned this when we were on the call, but my dad used to be executive chef for multiple restaurants like around the world and things like that. And you know, one of the biggest thing that he always asked for, the only thing he really asked for when we're at home, is for us to have dinner together.
Yeah.
You know, every time, especially Sundays, like you got to be home for dinner, right? But it's like such a powerful connection between people. Like food, just like people just, it's just so special, honestly.
Absolutely. And it connects people.
Right.
And I think that's like not going too far forward, I guess. That's, I think, where my wife and I connect. Like my wife is a professional, like she's a dental specialist, but she's Chinese, and family and food is very important to them. And it really resonates with me. And I just absolutely loved how food brings people together. And I guess where I'm going with my wife being a professional is, you get into a room full of doctors and you're just a cook, you know? I've always considered myself just a cook, even when running a restaurant. But everybody can talk about food. What's your last favorite meal? Or what amazing restaurant have you gone to? Or what are you excited about eating right now? It's just, I just love how, like, we all have to eat. So it's like, it brings us all together. Except those people that are like, oh, food is fuel and that's it. And I don't really want anything to do with those people.
Yeah, I can't relate to those people, that's for sure. But yeah, that's true. Yeah, food does really connect with people, and you can talk to anybody. Like for yourself, being in a situation full of doctors and everything like that, it's like, obviously you can talk about, you know, dentistry. Is that what the dentistry is? Yeah. But like obviously food is an easy topic that everybody can get along, and everybody has something that they really like. If it's not like a modern dish, it could be something that goes like a little bit way back, you know, from like family, like you were just mentioning, right? Yeah. So that's really interesting. So you went to Seattle for culinary school?
I did, yeah.
Perfect. And how long was that? Can you tell us a little bit about, and why Seattle?
So I got a culinary scholarship when I was in high school. I was competing in different culinary, I guess, what's the term? Competitions. Yeah, it's a hard so competitions. And I got a couple different scholarships to different schools. And I chose the Art Institute of Seattle. That's where I went. Based on the instructors and how it was close to Idaho. So they, you know, it kind of checked all the boxes, like close to home, good scholarship, and the instructors were great. And so that's why I chose Seattle. And so I was in Seattle for, I guess about 2 years. And during that time, like, it was weird because back in Idaho, like, I felt like I was like hot shit. You know, big fish in a little pond, if you will. Kind of could go to any restaurant and work. And then I went to Seattle and I couldn't get a fucking job to save my life, man.
Really?
When I was in culinary school, like, I wanted to work because that's, you know, where my passion was. And so I started working at the spaghetti factory for 6 months or whatever. And I staged at another restaurant. So are you familiar with the term stage?
Honestly, I'm like, not even just for the listeners, for myself. Like, I think I know the French version, but I'd rather, which is the same thing, but I think like a stage is like a level. It's like not a class. I know what it is in French, but I'll let you just explain it for the people that are listening.
So in the culinary world, you would do a stage where you go to a restaurant and you work for free. And essentially it's a working interview. That's the best way. And sometimes your stage may be a day. Sometimes it might be a month, a year, whatever your arrangement may be with the restaurant. So I staged at this kind of seafood restaurant down in Pike's Place. And on Valentine's Day, my girlfriend from Seattle came to visit. And the chef's like, hey, one of my dudes just walked out. Like, can you come sling tonight? And for most people, I mean, Valentine's is just balls to the wall. It's like one of the worst days to have to work as a cook.
I think it is the worst. One of the worst that Mother's Day.
But I mean, that's kind of what you sign up for when you get into restaurants. You work when everyone else has time off. So luckily, my girl was cool enough at the time, and she's like, "You should go." And so I went, and I slung, for 3-4 hours or whatever, got them through the shit, and then they didn't put me on anything hard. I was on pantry. I was like literally doing salads.
Right.
Nothing crazy.
Still working though.
Yeah. And then because I held my own, like I got a job. So yeah, and then I worked there pretty much the whole time I was in culinary school, and then I staged at a restaurant. It was a high-end French restaurant in Madison Valley called Rovers on Thierry Rodereau. Phenomenal restaurant. I was only there like 1 day a week. I worked for free, and it was just to learn. So yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah. And how long did you work? How long did you do that for?
So I was in Seattle for about 2 years.
And then the once a week thing.
Oh, that was probably about a year.
About a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how, like, so was that like a like just a different level to where you were working at pretty much, or?
Yeah, for sure.
And what was the difference between the environment of where you worked originally and then that going there once a week? Like, can you walk us through a little bit of the environment and the chef and the level of talent maybe?
Yeah, for sure. So the restaurant down on Pikes, which doesn't exist anymore, it's called Vivanda's. It was a band of misfits. Like, the sous chef was a scumbag. There's no other way to say it. And it was very punk rock and very like dog eat dog. And if you ever read Kitchen Confidential about like how like gritty the industry is, that was literally the epitome of it. And then you go to Rovers and it's just high class, clean, elegant, finesse. Like, we're looking at like, a grunge punk rock music, and then we're looking at like beautiful jazz music. It's both good for their own reasons, but there's just a level of execution and class that goes into it. So yeah, Rovers was where I first learned about like proper sauces and where knife skills really mattered. And you don't do cowboy cooking. You just literally, it's all about executing perfectly.
Right. So. Right. And like, so you worked there for like, or kind of volunteered there, I guess, for a year. Like, So were you like moving in different positions inside the restaurant? Like, were you stationary at one? Like, what was kind of like the day to day, even though it was for once a week, what was the day to day to that?
Yeah. So it was definitely, I was a gopher, a fill-in. So sometimes I would help with like the saucier side of things or the entremet side of things, or I'd help with like the hot apps. Like, really and sometimes like I'd sit back of the restaurant for 4 hours and clean mushrooms or concasse tomatoes or make sausage. It was literally whatever they wanted. But you learn by doing. And sometimes they would send the pastry chef home, and the pastry chef literally prepped everything, and I would just plate it. Like, they would build a plate and they put it in the fridge, and they're like, okay, just copy this, like put this here, sauce like this, sauce like that. And that was a lot of fun. Like, that like blew my mind, thinking I'm just like, okay, I'm just this young 18-year-old punk kid, and I'm like plating this most amazing like pastry, but it was super nerve-wracking when they made me try and write happy birthday, which was like still to this day, like trying to write happy birthday with a piping bag, like I've learned in culinary school, it's not a thing for me.
Yeah, it's like a one-shot go kind of thing. Like, I'm always impressed when you buy cakes or pastry chefs. I mean, they do it all the time, but I'm sure like, for your first couple of tries, it's obviously nerve-wracking to do that, because like one little mess up and it's like, okay, like I guess
or trying to write congratulations. That's the worst. I think nobody knows how to spell congratulations properly. We just put congrats. You're like, oh yeah,
short and simple.
Close enough.
Perfect. So did you end up like ever working there at all, or was that mostly spending some time to learn?
Yeah, it was just a stage.
And what was your biggest takeaway from that experience? Like maybe it could have been a moment or some piece of advice that he gave to you, or like is there anything that kind of stood out that you know carried on for the rest of your career maybe a little bit or that helped?
Just how to work organized and properly. Because essentially what I learned in that restaurant I used to go on to work like stage at Danielle. Daniel Blues, or Danielle is Daniel Blues restaurant in New York. And so you learn certain things like, okay, so when you're shown, they want you to prep something. Okay, cut celery root or whatever. They show you once. So the trick is to cut said vegetable. They cut said vegetable and show you. And you put their example in the corner of the board. So you know that's what I'm aiming for. That's the epitome of what it should look like every single time. So you put that in the corner of the board and you start prepping and you work left to right. And you're not working in your pile of scraps. So you might have to like cut off the edges to make a perfect julienne or something. So it's like you have another bin to put those scraps into. So you're not working on top of yourself. And these are the things that I definitely learned at Lumiere not Lumiere, Rovers, about working efficiently and clean and executing to the level expectation.
Right.
So that is literally a skill that I've taken and used indefinitely, and still like you would show young cooks like this is how you do it properly. You think about your whole step. So you're cutting celery rack. Okay, well, or celery root, same. You need a bin for your scrap. You need a bin for your finished product. Maybe you're cutting two different sizes, so you need another bin for that. So before you even get going, you go get 3 said bins, so you're set up for success. So one of my really good friends always said, a good pilot always has somewhere to land. So as you're cutting and whatever you're prepping, you have somewhere to actually put it. So yeah.
Interesting. And then so you would say like that's something that stick with you. Do you find yourself being more, because I'm assuming you like to cook at home as well?
Yeah, I still cook.
Do you see that technique or that philosophy of things coming at home, and then because you've been doing it for so long, so when you go home, is it the same kind of thing as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a bit OCD in that sense. And I think at first everyone that's around me, if they're not used to that type of cooking or execution, it drives them crazy. But then they realize that it's the way to succeed. So you don't ever have to look for a knife, or when you're cooking or whatever, it's far more efficient and far more enjoyable. So even my wife, like when she first started cooking, like I'm just like, yeah, that's not how you cut an onion. Like, this is how you cut an onion. So now like she has good knife skills and she knows how to like cut and prep properly.
Probably, yeah. So. Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. Like for her, it must have been a little bit different because, does she like to cook?
She does, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe when you came to her life, it was probably a bit of not confusion, but just like, oh, this is how you should do things, and like everybody has their own like perspective on that kind of stuff,
totally,
right?
Yeah.
And then so then did you go to New York after that?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So why New York? Well, let's go. Why New York?
Yeah. So I was working at Rovers and was at the Culinary Institute, and I wanted to. I had this hunger for knowledge and learning. And, my thought process was to become great someday, you have to learn from the greats. So what food kind of resonated with me at the time, because of Rovers probably, and the culinary school, was French food. Because most culinary schools are foundational French cooking. So they teach you methodologies based in French because it's probably the most documented, easiest way to teach. I'm sure somebody's going to disagree with me, but that's what culinary school is usually based on. So I chose Daniel Boulud. I was like, oh, well, this guy's a freaking legend. He's literally from the pedigree of Escoffier and Paul Bocuse. Like, you can literally trace his lineage for who he's worked for. So I chose Daniel Boulud, and luckily one of my instructors, all my instructors were very helpful in steering, because they knew that I was into it. I was in it to win it. And so one of my instructors, Chef Charters, she would always go to the Aspen Food and Wine Show, and she would see all the chefs, and she would always set up their demos and everything. And she's like, okay, well, if you write a letter, I will personally hand it to Daniel Boulud. Because if you mail in a letter, it doesn't ever go into the chef's hands. It goes through a secretary or somebody else, and somebody that, like, a person that handles interns or stages, and et cetera, et cetera. So she handed it to them. And the original goal was because in culinary school, you have to do 3 months of work outside the school to, like, so many hours to show that, you actually have industrial experience before graduation.
Gotcha.
So I was already working in the industry, so I ended up kind of flipping it. So I graduated and then went to work in New York. And one of my other instructors at the Art Institute, David Wynn, Chef Wynn, his parents lived in Jersey, which was about an hour and a half from the city, or an hour-ish. I can't remember. It was in Rutherford. So I lived with his parents. So I literally moved across the country, end up on one of my instructor's parents' doorsteps, and live with them to essentially stage Danielle for, I think the original plan was like 3 months. It's like, okay, I'm going to go there for 3 months. That's how much money I have saved, so I can pay rent and pay for food and learn as much as I can. I'm just like, this is finishing school, if you will.
Right.
I was like working 5-6 days a week, 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day, and then an hour commute on top of that. So I was pretty, like, exhausted at the end of the day, but
It's long days.
It was, it was good though. Like, I learned so much about, like, myself personally and the culinary world. But anyway, so I chose Daniel because he's a freaking legend. And so I went and was there for, I think, about 4 or 5 months, and they moved me up. And then after I got to Garde Manger, so I started as a stagiaire. So I was in the basement, just like concussing like 7-8 cases of tomatoes, picking herbs, like all kinds of shit. But I want to say that I was recognized quite quickly in the field, because when I would come up after service, like, I would have a trolley and all their mise en place would be packed perfectly, like, because I knew how it was supposed to be. So I'd go around to the kitchen and kind of like hand out all these goodies, like, oh, here's all your clean morels, here's all your clean herbs, here's all this. And I think the chefs are like, okay, well, this guy kind of knows what's going on. So they moved me up to canapes, which is like the mousse, like, and so I did that. And then about 4 months in, so essentially a month after I planned to leave, they moved me to Garde Manger because one of the Garde Manger cooks didn't show up.
Oh.
And I was like scared shitless, like, because I was downstairs in the basement. They're like, oh, the cook didn't show up, so you're gonna do Garde Manger today. I'm just like, holy fuck, like, all right,
Yeah.
like, okay, great.
Maybe explain also, just before we forget, what Garde Manger means, just because some people might not know what that means.
Garde Manger is like the cold starters. You're gonna get salads and tuna tartare and terrines and pâtés and cured fish, things like that. So, a 7-course meal from like Daniel may look like you get your amuse or your canapés, which is, anywhere between 4 to 5 little, like, 1-biters. And then you may get like cured fish or tuna tartare or caviar or maybe a combination of those, and then like a terrine, and then you may get hot apps or soup, and then after that you get a fish course or 2 fish courses, and then after that you get a meat course, and then you get pastries.
Right. Okay. And then so how was that when you start, like, day one? You need to come upstairs. We need you.
Well, I mean, yeah. Obviously, they weren't gonna let me sink. Yeah. They had too much riding on me, not like shitting the bed. But you know, it's still me. I'm just like, oh god, oh god, oh god. But yeah, it worked out. Obviously, I was there, and then I was there for about a month or whatever. And I went to the chef. I said, hey, can you guys give me something, some kind of like income so I can move closer and like stay here. And so like they did, and it wasn't a lot, but it was enough to cover rent. I moved to Queens. I took over a flat from somebody else in the restaurant. And after, I want to say like 7 months, I moved to the soup station, which is in the hot apps section of the kitchen. And I worked there for another 3 or 4 months. And because of my life choices in the city, I was drinking a lot to kind of cope, because you work like 12, 14 hours. Like I'd go drink my ridiculous amount of booze and pass out and do it all over again. Like my work never suffered, but it wasn't healthy. And so after a year, I decided like, okay, I'm going to leave the city. So I moved to Montana, which is where my mom was, and complete opposite of anything, like literally nothing around. It's forest. And so I fished and worked at a golf resort for like, I want to say like 2 months. And then I got a call from a buddy who I actually took the flat over from. He was like, dude, you got to come back to the city. Paul Liebrand is opening a spot. It's going to be like amazing, like epic. Like you can't miss this opportunity. And I'm just like, humming and hawing and thinking now, I'm just like, really? Like, why would you even like have to think about something like that? But anyways, he called back again, and I'm just like, okay, I'll come. When do I need to be there? And so I flew back and ended up living in New York for just under a year.
Okay.
I think it was like 11 months or something. And worked for Paul Liebrand at Gilt,
okay,
which was in the Palace Hotel. And Paul Liebrand was so different than Danielle. So Danielle essentially is all like nouveau cuisine. So it's like classical cuisine with like new clean interpretations of it. Where Paul was more about like molecular gastronomy and things of that nature. So we were doing like cool things with like methylcellulose foams and like xanthan gum and all these different like cool stabilizers. And his kind of chef that he looked up to was Pierre Garnier. And we actually had a big robust of him on the pass, which is where all the food goes out in the kitchen. So it was a cool thing to, I guess, learn that it's still having the same technique and foundational cooking, but kind of how Paul put it to me once was, you have this box and this foundational box, and you don't want to make the box unstable, but you can remove one side of the box and fill it in with a similar thing. So maybe it's a different texture or a different flavor that mimics that structural flavor profile. Okay. So an example of that was like kind of like caprese salad. So, you have your tomato, your mozzarella, and you have your basil, and then like balsamic and or olive oil, or, but like you could replace it to a tomato foam, or maybe instead of using basil, you're using chervil or something else that's giving you like anise flavor. That's kind of how his mind worked with those things, is like, let's like take the wheel, but make the wheel better or more interesting.
Right. Interesting. This episode is brought to you by Olive and Ciboulette lobster oil. What is lobster oil, you ask? It's pretty much an olive oil, except it's lobster infused. So if you're a seafood lover, if you want to put it on pasta dishes, salad dressing, sauces, you can saute with it. Or you can keep it simple, put it with some balsamic vinaigrette, some lobster oil, and a nice warm baguette. You can find us at www.oliveandciboulette.com. Talking about like, I don't want to call it like crazy cuisine or anything, but like talking about foams, like I remember my dad, he went to this restaurant in Chicago. I don't remember the name.
Alinea.
Is it Alinea?
For sure.
Is it Alinea? Okay, yeah. It is Alinea. And obviously like loves cooking, knows his stuff. And they went with their sous chef and the manager of the restaurant, and they went there for whatever, just to eat, because Chicago's it's a big place for food.
Yeah.
And he always remember this one time, like we went to this place, like X amount of course meal, and there was this little spoon with like this little foam on it, and he literally had he's probably slurped it, I don't know, didn't bite it because it's a foam, and it was like literally a Caesar salad in a little like foam, like it literally tasted like a Caesar salad. It's just so incredible. Like I've seen videos on YouTube, and it's literally a science. Like it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like what's the craziest thing you think you've seen there, or like the most flavorful thing you would say?
Oh,
I know we're going back a bit here.
That's like as far as like in the molecular gastronomy world.
Yeah, from what you've seen.
Oh, I mean, I would say the most riveting thing that still resonates to me was when we were in New York. I went to WD-50. WD-40 is a spray, right?
Yeah. WD-50.
I was like, Wiley DeFrey. It was his restaurant, and so we had a like the food, like Wiley was doing off the chart crazy shit.
Right.
He would take scalps and make it into pasta sheets and stuff like that.
Whoa.
But the dish that just like sticks with me when I think about that is it was a pre-dessert course, and it was so Ants on the Log?
No, I don't.
Okay, so Ants on the Log is like my childhood memory, like celery stick, peanut butter, and then you put raisins on top of it. Okay. Ants on a Log.
Okay.
It's an after-school snack. You can't get as simple as that.
I see Xander shaking his head in the back. He knows. Okay. All right. Interesting.
But what he did is he just like changed it. So he took like peanut butter, and he turned it into a powder, with maltodextrin, and literally you take an oil and you add this, like it looks like snow, and you just toss it and turns it, like it pulls those oils flavors to it. And then they did like a celery sorbet, and then I can't remember what they did with the raisins exactly. I think they might have been just marinated, but it was literally a celery sorbet, peanut butter powder, and these raisins. And it just like, holy fuck, this is my childhood. This is amazing. And it was literally not reinventing the wheel. Right. It was just like, let's just make it,
good.
make it cool. Let's make it interesting. And it just like explosion of flavors, and it was so simple but so like memorable.
Wow. Like it's always those little things, like it's like it doesn't seem like a big crazy thing, but it brings you those memories back, and it just like blows your mind with flavors and everything. When your friend, right, he's your friend, the one that called you from New York to come here. How did this work? Is it like, because like obviously there was computers and phones at the time, but like did you just like show up and it's like, I'm here to work, or you brought your resume? Like how would you get into that? Like, because it's kind of a risk to to go like there without? I'm not sure if you like notified them before. Like, is that what you did?
No.
No. Okay.
I mean, it was a brand new restaurant, so he was the sous chef. Okay. It like computers existed, but not like it wasn't like it was now.
Right.
So it was not like I emailed him. It was like a phone call,
right.
And he's like, "Hey, like I got a spot for you. Do you want it or not?" Kind of thing. Right. And you're like, "Yeah, I do." So yeah, it was a bit of a leap of faith. Like I jumped on a plane and showed up and Mike and he met me at the like not really restaurant at that point. It was still under construction. And they're like, he's like, okay, whoa, we're not starting the test kitchen. So we had a test kitchen for, I want to say a month before the actual restaurant was finished. But essentially he met me at the restaurant. He introduced me to people and yeah, that's
interesting
how it is. Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, test kitchen was crazy. Like I literally made gnocchi every single day for a month. Just trying to get it proper.
Right.
You know, cause when the doors open, you have to be able to execute it exactly how chef wants it.
Right. Right. And how was like that environment, like working there? Was that like from when you work in Seattle, like the other restaurant, like was it clean, quiet? People just working, like nice silence, like harmony together.
So essentially, Rovers exposed me to that environment, and then you learn to execute at those levels, you know, and how to set up your station and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I guess working for Paul was intense, because we would do lunch and dinner service, and when we first opened, I was the only I came back to do entremet for the saucier section. So I cooked the accoutrement, the vegetables and sauces, or the purees, not the actual sauce.
Right.
But I would have to prep during lunch service so I wouldn't run out for dinner service as well. So just crazy. And then we finally hired some other people, but it's hard to find people that can handle those environments and don't crumble.
Right. Have you seen people? I'm sure you have some stories or seen some people. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at Danielle, it's so bad, but because the environment was so intense, we wouldn't learn people's name on purpose because we didn't know if they were going to last. And if you lasted for, you know, a few days or a week, then we made an effort to actually like get to know you.
Right.
Which is, it's bad. Like I appreciate where the industry is going now with that kind of working on mental health and stuff like that. But at the time it was like, yeah, we don't know if these people are going to be able to hack it or not. So like I'm so in the weeds. I'm so in the shit. Like I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. So why am I going to put in effort if this person is not here to help us execute what we're trying to do?
Right. Yeah. And it's the call-in industry, obviously it's changing now, but it's such a rough industry. Like it's like you mentioned, you're working when everybody's off. It's long hours. Reward is kind of small, honestly. Like, yeah, you get your pay and everything, but it's just like the people that work in the culinary industry, except those like really like Cactus Club, Joey's, and like that's a little bit different. But I mean, it's not even like a real restaurant, in my opinion. It's different.
It's different. So, one of my instructors once said to me at culinary school, because I'm just like, because I was kind of like, I was in it to win it. I wanted to go work for the best chefs. And I looked at her and was like, how do you do it? How do you deal with these people? And way she put it was, not everyone's going to be in fine dining. There's different levels of cooking. So yeah, Cactus Club and Earl's and Joey's, those may not be the places I want to go and eat, but they do have a place in the world of food. You can't discredit that. Just like a simple, like, you know, greasy taco or a corner hot dog vendor in New York. Like, these all have places in the culinary world. And I don't think I'm not trying to disagree.
Oh no, it's fine.
I don't want to discredit those people.
Right.
But we've all had like an epic falafel or French fries in the late hours. I mean, I was telling you about curry chips in Ireland. So all these things have a place in the culinary world. You can't eat Michelin food every day of your life.
It's true.
And you want those like greasy burgers or simple salads or whatever it may be, because you want variety.
Right, that's true. And thank you because I had never really thought about it this way. So thank you for showing me this, because for me, I was just like, okay, like if you don't work, not that you have to work at a high dining restaurant. What I was just saying, it's just like people that do work at that level, but also in that perspective you just said, like that kind of answers my question a little bit. But like people are so passionate, right? Yeah. Like you're working all these hours and minimum reward, working all these times, and like you're working on Christmas, like all these Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, all whatever, and it's just people are so passionate, like yourself, for example, right? And it's just like so like it's kind of like beautiful, honestly, because it's like people are willing to sacrifice that like part of their lives, right, to follow their passion, which is like actually incredible to see. Like I mean, nowadays a little bit different with different jobs and everything like that, right? But it's like it's definitely like an industry that's definitely in the shadow a little bit and not being like how do I say, like loved as much, or it is being loved, but like, you know, not enough credit, I feel, right?
The industry is really changing quite rapidly in the last 2 years. It's just been flipped on its head. So, and the younger people don't want to deal with those environments. Like you're saying, like, I would literally be abused. And it wasn't for, like, I wouldn't do the job for pay. I wouldn't do the job for, like, lifestyle. It was literally because I was proud of where I worked and the food I was producing, and it was love of said food.
Right, that's so true, and that's like it's beautiful to hear that, honestly, just like because of the world we live in. And I mean, there's still a lot of people like that, right? Obviously, but it's super interesting. So what were the next moves after? Like, so what was next after that? Like, you were in New York for less than a year, correct?
Yeah.
And then did you left New York, or was it just for that restaurant you left?
I left New York
completely. Okay.
And so I moved back to Seattle. So I was in New York for just shy of 2 years, and then moved back to Seattle. And so I moved back to Seattle, and I didn't necessarily have a job lined up in Seattle when I moved back. But as bad as it sounds now, I wasn't too worried. I had some, money. I could pay rent for a month or whatever too. And it's like I took over somebody's flat. So it wasn't, bad as far as that. So I went to Rover's to talk to my old chef and see what was going on, maybe get a job, kind of, softly fill it out. Yeah. And they're like, oh, hey, how's it going? And they're like, oh, we actually don't have any room right now. I'm just like, oh, that's cool. They're like, but you remember Johnny? And Johnny was the guy I worked with. He's a sous chef up at Harvest Vine. You should go up and talk to him. And Harvest Vine is the Spanish place I was talking about, Basque. It was like a block away. Okay. So I literally just walked across the street, and I said, oh, hey, Johnny, what's going on? And I just got back in town. He's like, hey, man, what's going on? And, we were catching up. And then Joseba, the chef of the restaurant, rolls through. And all of a sudden, I find myself in an interview. They're like, hey, we're hiring. Do you want a job? And, Joseba's asking me questions. And I'm just like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love a job.
Yeah.
And just like thinking about it, like I'm literally in like flip-flops, Carhartt jeans, like shirt with holes in it, like not expecting to be in an interview, just like casual, like,
what's up?
Yeah, exactly. But it was good. Like, so yeah, I got a job at the Harvest Vine and learned Spanish food and just fell in love with it. It was really hard at first, like going from learning like, French food, butter, cream, I know all the mother sauces and foundation and all that stuff, and learning that it's like, oh no, I mean, these are the mother sauces. These are the ones that we may have in common with, France, because the Pyrenees, they're very close. But still very separate cuisines.
Definitely, yeah.
And I really started to appreciate the simplicity and the elegance of taking just like, 2 or 3 amazing flavorful ingredients and letting them shine. Mm-hmm. And it's not that you don't do that in French, but French, I feel, is far more manipulative than Spanish cuisine.
Okay. And what was your favorite part? Like, what was the moment where you're like, oh, I love doing this type of cuisine? Was there a specific moment, or was it just like you did a bit of research before you went in, or like when you started working?
It just kind of happened. Like, I don't have a moment that was like, it's just when you start tasting the food, like I think I went into dinner and you taste the food and you're just like, wow, this is so simple, but it's so soulful. And it kind of like brought me back to like those simple Dutch oven cooking with my grandfather, just like sauteed mushrooms with garlic and a sherry to deglaze with. And you're just like, holy fuck, like this is so simple, but it's so amazing. I mean, shit, I still make the beet salad on a regular basis.
Nice.
And it's literally like boiled beets with garlic, sherry vinegar, and a good olive oil. Like,
right.
So simple, but it's like mind-blowing delicious.
Right.
And so you start appreciating the simpler things, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And then, so is that when you started? You said you mentioned someone went for Top Chef Canada.
No, that was when I moved to Vancouver.
Okay, cool. So tell us about that. Like,
so after I met my wife actually at that restaurant.
Okay. Were you working?
I wasn't.
Okay.
It's a kind of a funny story. Her friend lived across the street and was a graphic designer, and she kind of was known by our head waiter, Juan Carlos, who was from Argentina.
Okay.
And she was from Colombia. So anyways, they became friends. And so my wife would come in, every once in a while. But because her friend lived across the street, she was kind of put in the category of a regular. So anyways, one day, my wife, Michelle, I came into the restaurant and was showing Christina, her friend, the business card that her friend designed for her. She's like, oh, they turned out great. Here's a business card. And she had just moved back to Vancouver because she was doing her specialty at UW. And Juan Carlos rolls through and he like grabs the card. He's like, what's this? She's like, oh, it's my business card. Christina designed it. And he's like, oh, I love it. I keep it. I take. And, Juan Carlos, like, he understands everything, but he refuses not to speak in broken English. Like, he uses it to his advantage. It's hilarious. I love him. He's like my kind of Argentinian father.
Okay.
And then I went into the restaurant for dinner probably a week later. He's like, the girl, the twin, the dentist, she leave her card, you take. And so I thought Michelle at the time left her card for me, thinking that she wanted to like hang out at some point. And so anyways, we played phone tag for a while and we went for coffee and we started dating. And long story short, I got the job from Danielle. Well, okay, so I wasn't going to move to Vancouver unless I found a good job.
Okay.
I'm just like, it's not fair to our relationship. And so I was looking at Lumiere to work for Rob Feeney, and they closed. And Michelle at the time, she's like, oh, in the newspaper, Daniel Blude is actually taking it over. I'm just like, oh, Daniel Blude? I'm just like, I used to work for Daniel in New York.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I'm just like, I'll give you a call back. So I literally hung up, called New York. They're like, oh yeah, we're open. How's it going? Yeah, actually, we're opening something near to you, because they knew I was in Seattle. And I'm just like, oh, that's actually why I'm calling. They're like, oh, well, the chef that's going to be running it, Del McKay, is here. Can you come this weekend to meet him? I'm just like, yeah, okay. So I literally flew to New York. They put me on my old station on Friday night. And I, it was kind of a sink or swim kind of thing. Then I went for charcuterie with Dale at one of Daniel's other restaurants in New York. Got the job. They sponsored me. They relocated me to Lumiere. And so I lived separate from Michelle because we were still dating. And I worked for Dell there. And we were there for, I guess, I think it was about 2 years or so. It was just after Olympics it closed.
Right, 2010.
Yeah. And then, he was like training. He wanted to be on Top Chef Canada season 1. And so we were like, I would be like, oh, okay, here's your thing. And so he'd go and cook and execute, and we were training for him to do the test. And Dale's a phenomenal cook. Like, we always just kind of said he's a bit of a idiot savant. Like, when he cooks, he just cooks. Like, he can taste something or see something, and he's worked for some great, amazing chefs like Gordon Ramsay, and so he's very talented. So anyways, so we practiced for Top Chef, and then Lumiere closed, and then we went to Ensemble.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
And how do you train for Top Chef? Like, what is that like? Like,
well, I mean, at the time, because it was so new, like, we literally, like, everyone was in the school in the restaurant were like watching all the old Top Chef US.
Oh, okay.
And trying to like get a leg up of like, oh, this is one of the competitions or tests they're going to do. And I just went to Wikipedia and just printed out, like, I'm just like, oh yeah, I don't have the whatever so many hours to watch all these shows. I'm just going to get the synopsis and the takeaway. And then, I'd be like, okay, you have, 30 minutes to execute this dish or the whatever. Okay. Or I'd give them like octopus or something like that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
But like, I had this crazy NDA that I had to sign. So I didn't tell anyone for like, like I knew he'd won like for over a year.
Yeah.
And, then they start showing the things, and we at the time had moved to Ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like doing viewing parties, and he had like dishes that he had won with. Like, actually, one of the dishes he won with was a recipe that I essentially taught him, which was a pulled pork.
Okay.
And then he took it and made it his own, of course. And so we had it on the menu. So, like, we would do different viewings and put that on special, and different chefs would come and cook and hang out during different show or episodes. It was a really cool time. Like, Connie and John from Charcut in Calgary. Connie was also on the same season. She got second place. She came out, and like, they did events, and it was just really cool to connect with all those people and do the event.
Nice. And I know there was like when I called you the first time that we met, there was a little bit of a business, or when we talked about that little project. It starts with a B. I forgot what it was called. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Biota,
yeah. Like, so how did you come across? Like, how did that start?
How did that happen? Okay, so Ensemble closed. Dale moved to Saskatchewan. I kind of jumped around a couple places in the city. Worked at Lazy Gourmet, and then was going to open a place. And then I came across this ad for the Stable House Bistro, needing a chef. And so I kind of went in and saw the potential, and I'm just like, okay, well, I will take on this job. And they were like 2 months old, 3 months, and they were running like a 50% food cost. Like, it was fucked. because the opening chef was just a muppet, no idea what the fuck he was doing. So anyways, so I went in and I brought in my buddy who kind of he met me at Ensemble Tap, which was the second restaurant of Ensemble. And he kind of jumped around with me, and he came into Stable House Bistro, and we were, getting food costs on point and doing some amazing food. And he was kind of doing a side hustle making kombucha. And I didn't really like kombucha.
Why didn't you like kombucha?
It's at the time I hadn't had one that really I liked. They were just sour and taste like feed and just not like mass production. It's kind of like, okay, when you drink like shitty malt liquor and you have a craft beer, it's like, it's kind of like that, there's nothing wrong with OE or, any of those malt liquors, but there's something to be said about a nice, craft brewery. So that was kind of the thing. And so he wanted to open a kombucha company, and he's like, oh, you should do it with me. And was like, okay, well, I'll open a fermentation company with you. Like, we can try this if you want. But I have to be able to do the vegetables and stuff like that, because that's where my passion was. Because at the restaurant at Stable House, like, we were working with different farmers, and I was like canning stuff and pickling stuff, and then actually fermenting stuff as well, so we could use it as layering the flavors in a dish, or actually prolonging and preserving it for later purposes. And that's pretty much where Biota came from. And so so we opened Biota, and we launched with like one kombucha, and then we expanded to like 3 or 4. We started with like a simple sauerkraut and kimchi, and then pickled curry cauliflower, and then one of the days at one point we couldn't sell all the kombucha we made. And kombucha, when it's especially craft, it's quite lively. And as it ages, it becomes vinegar, essentially.
Right.
And coming from the restaurant world, I'm just like, I can't waste this. Like, this is literally money of our new business. Like, I can't dump this. So I'm just like, oh, maybe I should try and make mustard with it. And so we launched the mustard side of things, which was actually probably one of the best things that we produced.
Really?
Yeah.
And what was the ingredients in that? Like what?
So kombucha vinegar,
okay.
Canadian mustard seed, mustard powder, onion powder, turmeric, salt. Pretty much it. Yeah.
Interesting. And like, so was that your favorite one to make? Like, is there any maybe recipes or things that kind of that you enjoyed making a little bit more than others? Or
I really love the mustard.
Yeah.
And I loved it because it really helped me connect with a lot of restaurants. So like St. Lawrence, which is a Michelin star restaurant, used our mustard when it was available.
Oh, wow.
Published used our mustard, which is also another Michelin. Hawksworth. Like, so it was cool to have these really great restaurants in our city want our product, because that was the whole point, was to still be in the industry and still be providing good food, but just a different vein of it. So I still use the same farmers when we were doing pickles and stuff like that. So yeah, I really dug that side of things. Or when the farmer's like, oh, I have, so much like daikon or so much of the Ring of Fire chilies, like, can you take some or take them? And you're like, yeah, I'll take them. And so you end up with like, 50 to 100 pounds of vegetable, and you had to make it into a ferment, and, you had to be creative, and yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
That's what I enjoyed.
Sounded like very like a creative kind of side hustle at the time, and like really fun. And It's kind of cool that I've never met someone that's done things like that, so it's really cool to be able to learn that from you. Is there anything, so what are the plans now? Like, what have you been up to these days?
Well, it's on a bit of a downer note. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with primary progressive MS. So I pretty much sold Biota, closed it up, and for the last year, I've just been navigating that new chapter of my life, learning how to function with my new limitations, if you will. At some point, I'll do something else. Like I'm still doing like in the 11th of February, I'm doing a fermentation class with Food Stash.
Right, I remember you telling me. Yeah.
Food Stash is a really cool organization. They essentially rescue food from grocery stores or farms and stuff. So, like as food is starting to get close to their expiration date or best before date, or food may have blemishes, they essentially rescue it and redistribute it to people in need. And they have a pop-up market once a week where you go in and you pay what you can. So it's a really good organization to rescue the food and essentially diverge things from the waste stream.
Right.
And so we, actually at Biota, that's where I connected with them. I'm just like, why don't we take some of these seconds, is what we call in the industry, the product that might have a bruise or whatever, you can just cut it out and it's still quality, it still tastes good. And so we would take said seconds and ferment it and jar it and give it back to them, and they would use it for fundraising purposes. So
that's awesome. That's really cool, actually. And I'd love to, I know you're doing that. When are you doing that present? In February, you said?
Yeah, 11th.
I would love for, if that's okay with you, to meet them at one point. And I'd love to see behind the scenes and get involved. And I think that's definitely something that we're not just here in Vancouver, all over the world, we waste so much food, right? So it's always nice to see some kind of program that helps that, because really at the end of the day, if it's just a bruise or anything, obviously grocery stores and for restaurants, obviously for aesthetic purposes, you want to keep that, right? But we throw away so much food, and I think a lot of people know that already in the world, right?
Totally. So, I mean, even me, I know better, but when I go to the grocery store and you're paying premium prices, you're just like, well, I'm going to pick the best apple or tomato that is in front of me. Definitely. But it doesn't mean that the one that has a bruise is not good. It's just,
just got the short stick, short end of the stick, I guess.
This is it, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Xander, thank you for doing this. Is there anything you want to share, or is there an Instagram that people can follow you at, or is there anything that you want to share? Maybe tell you about your program, the thing that you're doing. Can people join that, or is that more like they have to sign up, or?
So yeah, I mean, I think there's still tickets available.
Okay.
It's on Eventbrite. I have a link on Biota YVR, which is our Instagram. And you can also do it through Food Stash as well, which they have an Instagram. I think it'll be usually it's 12 to 15 people. And you'll go in and you pay money, and they essentially use it for fundraising purposes. They supply the food, and you get a fermentation vessel. You get the knowledge to do it. Then you make the ferment. You jam it in a jar. You go home with a little fermentation vessel and a ferment started. And yeah, it's a great thing.
Cool. Well, we don't have a huge following yet, but we'll definitely let them know for sure. And I'll definitely spread the word on other accounts and everything. And I think it'd be kind of a cool thing for people to participate in, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great thing to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. For the people that are watching, thank you so much for watching a second episode of Table 604. I'm your host, Hugo, and we'll see you next time on the podcast. Thank you.